Hello everyone and welcome back to another pastel painting, and I'm continuing on with our vintage florals. I don't have a lot of breath, I'm still pretty ill, so we're just going to have to kind of follow this, and for some odd reason my camera just doesn't seem to be coping with me drawing, sketching out these flowers, as you can see. But basically we're going to start by sketching these flowers out where I kind of want them on the page. So this is classic flowers in a vase. I'm just kind of making this up, so there's no reference photo. I didn't do any pre-sketches or anything. I just thought, stuff it, I'm not feeling well. We're just going to go straight in and just create something from our heads. Now, obviously, we've already done the vintage florals studies in the smaller pieces. So we kind of know what we're going to do and how we're going to do it on the page. So we're going to start with this nice big one right here where I'm putting it now, and then behind it we've got these other two. So I've got a slightly larger one and then a smaller one that's kind of still a bud, but I've put that so that it's touching the edge of the page. Now when you lay out your composition, if you have main parts of your composition effectively touching the side of the page, so obviously your painting is going to touch all four sides of the page, that's kind of the whole point. But if you've got a main point of composition, like for example this is effectively a still life, you've got flowers in a glass jar with water, and you put the flowers in a position where some of them are touching the side of the page, or they seem to go off beyond the limits of the canvas that you're working on, it gives people a sense of depth. It gives them a feeling that there is something more beyond this painting, and their brains fill in the gaps. And that's kind of what you want to do. It's the same with kind of impressionism and expressionism as well, is you create something which represents the item that you're painting, but if you make your marks really expressive and really bold, you still have the shape and you have the colour and you have the tonal values which give you an idea of distance, shadow, shape, texture. Your brain fills in all of the little bits and pieces in between. You know, if you actually took a close-up look of one of my smaller flower studies, really close up, you wouldn't have a clue what it was. It isn't until you step back that all of the different marks and colours and tonal values on the page suddenly come together and your brain goes, oh, that's a flower. And in the case of the floral studies, oh, that's not just a flower, it's a rose, it's a pink rose, it's a white rose, it's a group of roses, there are some leaves. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty fine details to be able to prescribe something on a page to say, this is what I'm painting. So as you can see, I have offset my vase so that these flowers are touching the edge, so that it gives this painting something more. Your head's going, well, obviously that rose goes off the painting edge, but in your head it's going, I know that the rest of that's there, even though I've not painted it. So the vase well, it's not a vase actually, it was a glass jar, because I was like, do you know what, I've got loads of glass jars running around, and glass caught my attention. So we've got this jar, we've got flowers, we've got some leaves. I wanted to put something on the bottom so that it kind of brought your eye down as well as up, because the last thing you want to do is have somebody look at a painting and just look at the middle of the painting where your focal point is, although mine's not dead center and I don't ever recommend doing anything dead center, but your eye knows where the focal point is and you're going to look directly at the focal point. By adding this extra flower at the bottom, which is lying on the tabletop with its leaves kind of sticking up slightly, you've created interest. Your eye then travels from the main focal point down to this rose because it's interesting. It's different to the rest of the bunch of flowers that are together in this jar. So your mind's going, oh, that's curious. What's that? Why is that there? And provides a story, it provides information, it provides interest, it provides opposition to the main focal point. So it gives, sometimes don't just do flowers in a vase. Look outside of the box when you're creating your composition. Now finally, I'm getting into pastels, and I love this part. This is where we start getting colour down, I start to have fun. I swear the camera's doing funky things with this painting and I have no idea why it kept doing that, so I do apologise. It's not your eyes, it's definitely the camera. Although with my eyesight it could have been both, but I'm going to assume you see the same things I do in this video. So yes, I know I totally messed up with the camera angle and everything should have been shifted a couple of inches to the right, which meant you would have been able to see all of my plate, but you will see it soon, don't worry. I will adjust this so that you can see the plate and see the colours I'm using. Again, I've gone from a limited colour palette. These are all the same pastels that I used with the flower studies, with the addition of 2 extra pinks and a couple of greys and a beige, because that's what I needed for the background. So all the rest of the colours are the same colours I've been using from the flower studies, just so I could keep some continuity in what I was doing. So I'm working this in exactly the same way that I was kind of doing earlier. I'm layering down colours where I roughly think they should be in these flowers. Remember, I'm not using a reference photo, I'm just making this up. And I want a good mixture of colours, because when light hits petals, some petals are semi-transparent, so you see the light come through the petals, so you don't get these highlights just on the petals themselves, but you also get mild highlighting on the petals around them, because the light goes through that petal and illuminates some of the other petals around it. And what you tend to find when that happens is that you start losing the shadows at the base of each petal, which then kind of delineates each petal. So you have to think very carefully about where your light's coming from, how that affects each petal of the flower, and where you actually want to maybe take some of that light away in order to ensure that you've got the shape and the composition of the flower. Otherwise, if you did it with direct light onto a flower, you tend to find you lose all your petal edges, you lose all your shadows, and it also washes out all of the colour. And what's the point of painting flowers if you don't want to get all your colour? I love colour, and that's why I love painting flowers. I don't honestly paint a lot of flowers. I do prefer landscapes, and I'm not up there with one of the best at flowers. Flowers are definitely not one of my best things for painting. But I do enjoy them, because I enjoy the shapes, I enjoy the colour, I enjoy the way that you can get light to play off them to create this interest and this kind of raw romantic beauty that you kind of get with flowers, especially if you're working with things like peonies or roses. Now, I've got another painting coming up, which I've also done, and I know I'm quite croaky as well at the moment, and I'm probably going to do what I did with the other one, is do a voiceover, just because my breathing is a complete mess at the moment, and it's hard to talk and breathe accordingly, which I know one is not necessarily necessary and one is absolutely necessary for being alive, so I have to kind of prioritize. But I've been doing a lot of floral work in a sketchbook that you haven't seen, and you will see more of that in the next video. It is a completely different style. I tend to stylize these ones that I'm doing here as more kind of romantic, kind of vintage romanticism going on. It's kind of chintzy, kind of quaint, kind of cottagecore feel. And really, it's quite beautiful, and that's lovely. But me being me, I love bold colours and, over exaggeration, and I've been doing a lot of more, not abstract, but maybe more kind of loose, impressionistic style flowers, which are more stylized. And it allows me to play a lot more with colours. So hopefully I will be able to get that video up in the next couple of days and you'll be able to see it. I really loved how the painting turned out. It's not on sanded paper, and I know I probably should have said earlier this isn't sanded paper either, and I like being able to push the boundaries on using my pastels with other papers that are not sanded, with either straight off no preparation like this one, or with some preparation like my other video. But I will explain more in that video, but hopefully you guys will really like it and maybe have a go. Now back to this piece. As you can see, I've got a lot of the colours down, I've smoothed a lot of them out. I've not just done a base colour and then smoothed it out. I just kept this very loose and just kept adding layers upon layers. Now, that is tricky because, yes, as you might have noticed, again, this is another piece of the Canson May 10s paper. So it's non-sanded pastel paper, significantly cheaper than sanded pastel paper. And with this really kind of fun texture. Now in this case I have turned it over and I'm using the smooth side. Now smooth is a bit looser terminology for this paper because it's still not smooth, as you can see from the texture that I'm getting through on the pastels, but it is smoother than the chain link pattern, which is the traditional pressed pattern that you get on the ingress style papers. So I've turned it over and I'm using the smoother side because I didn't want the chain link texture particularly coming through on this one. Now I've done the usual, I've layered down a mid colour first, so that's a mid-tone colour, and then I've come in with my darks where I want to accent the inner shadows. So they're the shadows created at the base of the petal coming up that you can see, and it helps kind of delineate each petal. And then on top of that, I'm now starting to work my lightest tones. Now this pink here is not the lightest. I have white as well. I wanted these to be a kind of blush pink and white kind of rose. I didn't want it white because of the colours that you're going to see that I'm going to use for the background, but I wanted something that was a bit kind of pale pink tones with white highlights. And you can kind of see the shape that I've gone with these roses. So you've got some pointing away, some pointing to the side, some kind of pointing forward but up, and none of them pointing directly at us. That's another way of also being able to create interest. So when you're looking at a rose or looking at a bouquet of roses, you can quite easily see, none of them generally like to face directly towards you, no matter how you do it. And that's because obviously the flower head is on a stem which then points down, which then comes down away from it. So the flower head is never going to be at a 90-degree angle to the stem. There's a few flowers that specifically do that and actually grow in that way, like for example sunflowers. However, roses definitely don't. Their heads are very much perched directly on the top of the stem, in line with that kind of vertical length. So you tend to find when you create a bouquet of flowers that none of them will ever face directly at you. So you need to remember that when you're creating your composition, that these flowers are not going to be facing directly forward. They're going to be facing at different angles away from you, but you do want to kind of keep them in a way that you're able to capture them, especially as if you want to have some nice big heads as well as the smaller kind of tighter bud heads like I've done here, then you want to be able to place those kind of center and off center so that you get that wow and that impact of those flower heads. Now I'm starting to put the highlights on the jar. Now you'll see I will come in with the darks over the top and then relighten later, and the reason for that is This is just giving me an idea of where things are as it is at the moment. And now we're going to come in with the leaves. Now, the leaves for this, because I wasn't using a reference photo, I kind of bodged this a wee bit, and I wasn't 100% happy with how this ended up. And that's because in my head, the way I kind of visioned the leaves was the way they come off each stem. But when you've got them as a bouquet, they kind of cross over each other, kind of get caught on each other. Some of them curl, some of them don't curl, some of them stick at weird angles. And because of that, it became a bit of a mishmash with these leaves. And I feel like if I was to revise it going forward and maybe redoing this painting, I would probably reduce the leaves. Now, if you want to paint from real life, and you want to go and buy yourself a bouquet of flowers, have a think about the foliage on those flowers. Do you want all of it? Or maybe do it in this way. Put your bouquet together, put it in a jar or vase, look at it, and then look at the leaves. Is there too many leaves? Is there too much greenery? Is there not enough difference, like different types of greenery? These, in my head, I just envisioned just roses, and that meant because so many of the leaves were the same and the same colour, that they just kind of all blended into each other, which became a mess. Had I thought about it, and had I had some for real life to paint from, what I probably would have done is put them in the jar of water, looked at it and gone, no, that's just too much of the same without any interest. Now, I'm an artist, so I could cheat and I could create differences, and you can see me kind of doing that here by adding in different colours. You'll also see me later going back over it and making it disappear again. One of the things you can do is do your bouquet, put it in the jar, look at it. If it's too much the same, start taking flowers out and taking some of the leaves off. Maybe stick to 3 leaves per stem. When you put them back in, you'll end up with gaps, and that will allow you to be able to show where those leaves are sitting. And the air gaps, effectively neutral space, will then give you better shaping for your bouquet and the leaves and the flowers all together. So yes, I probably should have taken my own advice and just went over to the co-op and got some flowers and just did it like that. However, I don't know about you, but I do not have a lot of money for flowers. It's pretty expensive, and also being very early spring, or in the case of Scotland, it's definitely still winter. The only place you can go is to buy them. My peony bushes are coming up at the moment. They're looking pretty good. I'm looking forward to being able to pick those and maybe painting some of those in the summer. But for now, it has to be bought flowers, and it's just so super expensive. The way to get round that, and there is a couple of ways, is either go in to your local supermarket and go to where they're selling fresh flowers, and most supermarkets do, and take photos of the bouquets in the buckets. Yes, that's cheating, and yes, usually they have plastic wrapping around them, and therefore you can only see the top, but it will give you a good reference place to work from. Other things you can do, and sometimes how I cheat, is I will go to the website of postal florists. So here in the UK, we've got a gorgeous company called Bloom and Wild. Please Google them and take a look. It's just the bouquets and the way they photograph the bouquets are absolutely stunning, and I have had fresh flowers sent from them to me for various reasons, and they are beautiful, and they will give you a really good idea of how to create compositions of flowers without actually buying some. Now, obviously, I do not recommend or even condone painting outright and copying outright one of their photos. However, it doesn't mean that you can't create your own compositions looking at their bouquets and the kind of additional filler foliage that they put in, the mix of flowers they like to group together, so that you can create your own composition. Usually, and you'll see in the next video briefly from my sketchbook, but obviously at the end of the month for my sketchbook zine, you'll see that I take these sorts of images and then I take a pencil and I sketch out my own bouquet based on elements from lots of theirs. So, you know, I liked the orange roses in one, but I like the kind of fern-like foliage that they'd used to filler from another. They had these small little bud flowers that looked almost like the flowers you get on chives, but obviously it's out of season and you wouldn't put chive flowers in a bouquet, but they look very similar, and they were really pretty as filler flowers because they're quite tight and quite small. So I added some of those in, and then in another image there was some long dark grassy like leaves, so I brought that in. And it's a good way of being able to mix and match flowers to create your own style bouquet for painting without actually having to purchase flowers. Obviously, once it comes to summer, we'll have an abundance of flowers to go and paint. Obviously, you won't get them all in a bouquet, but it means that just wandering out, if you've got a garden, looking at your own flowers and things that are growing there. And don't just look at the flowers. Also look at the vegetation, look at the leaves and from the different plants, and think about how you could fit those into your composition as well as the flowers. The flowers are the easy part. You know, everybody likes pretty flowers, but it's the filling in. You can't just have a bouquet of just flowers. It doesn't look right. You need some of that foliage to balance out your vibrant colours. So go out and take a look at the different foliage as well that surround your flowers, not just the actual foliage from the flowers that you're thinking of painting, but other random things. You know, you don't have to just do the foliage based on those flowers. That's why these bouquets that you get from professional florists have got filler foliage that isn't even related to the flowers you've put in there, but they look good. Things like eucalyptus, gorgeous kind of bluey green tone round leaves, really great for offsetting. Another one that I used recently was rosemary. It's a herb, but the spikiness of the branches really gave something different to one of my paintings. So just have a look and also see what else you can find to kind of bring together these images and these compositions. Look all around you, look at what you've got. I have got tons of winter pansies at the moment, still in flower. Yes, it is Scottish weather, it is still cold, so we still have winter pansies. And eventually I'm going to be shifting those out of my window boxes and putting my geraniums in. And I love geraniums, and I'm going to be painting a lot of those. I could paint the pansies, but I'm just not inclined to. They are very pretty though. So what sort of flowers do you guys like? You know, roses are obviously a favourite from a lot of people. I had, not geraniums, gerberas. I had gerberas for my wedding in this beautiful deep dark red colour. They were absolutely stunning. Obviously peonies, I love peonies, not just for the scent but also for the shape and the vibrancy. Busy lizzies, lots of different wildflowers, things like cornflowers. I love the blue tones. So what flowers do you guys like? Please leave in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Now, we're putting this white highlight in, like I said earlier. I kind of felt like I might have gone overboard on the white highlight. I felt like it was a little bit too much, but you know, it doesn't matter. This, at the end of the day, I was just having fun and I was really enjoying it. The flower at the bottom is annoying me a little, but it is darker than the flowers that are in the jar just because it's actually more in shadow than everything else. So I've had to think really carefully about this jar, and bear in mind that it's a glass jar, so the majority of the colours you will see is going to be the colours from the background and from the tabletop, and not necessarily like water or anything else. So you've got to really think about where your jar is, where the waterline is, because that's where you're going to find some highlighting, which will be cutting around the edge of the water, and then the reflectiveness of that water from anything that's in it and also anything that's behind it. Also remember, and this one stumps no end of amount of people, that if you look at a jar straight on, you'll see the stems come down, but then where you see them in the water, they're usually to the left or right of where they actually come out the water. And it's that illusion of the magnification that's caused by the water, and therefore it shifts the perspective. And that can really catch people out when you're painting it. It's usually easier just to paint your stalks coming into the water and not really paying too much attention to how the water is distorting the look of the stalks versus where they come out of the water and up to the flowers. It can get really complicated trying to work out how that looks, where it starts, where it stops, and then the actual general reflections. If you spend too much time trying to work on that, you'll actually miss the point of what you're trying to achieve with these flowers in the vase. Well, jar in my case. I don't actually have many vases. I have 2 cats, so you can imagine why I don't have many vases. I think, did we lose one recently? Yeah, I think we lost a vase recently due to the youngest one. She does like to shove things off of surfaces. So we're just putting in our kind of background colours now. This is where the beige and the darker colours that come in earlier that I said. The darker colour that I've used in the jar is because where it's kind of hitting the tabletop, it's in shadow, and therefore its own shadow on the tabletop was making the water being seen through the jar darker than the tabletop, if that makes sense. And then behind the kind of roses is another colour again, as you will see as we go up. I'm just reinforcing these leaves. They're still bugging me at this point, as you can see. I'm just working on them, thinking, nah, just not gonna happen. I think I actually give up at this point and think, God, I just can't quite get them where I want. I'm just reinforcing, camera. I regularly bump into it, sorry guys. Just reinforcing the kind of edges here of the jar. You'll tend to find that the light will always catch the edges of the jar even when it's in shadow, and therefore you will get this very fine kind of edge line that you can kind of pick out with the highlight. Try not to lose my voice while doing this voiceover. So that's looking a little bit better now. Kind of getting there. I didn't want this to be a particularly long video. I'm not really up for doing long videos at the moment, so we're just kind of keeping them short and fun, and also kind of cheap by using the cheaper pastel paper. There's so many people struggle with this type of paper, and I think it's just knowing how to use it and knowing when to stop and not putting a lot of layers in. As you can see here, I'm not doing a lot of smoothing, I'm not doing a lot of blending, I'm literally just layering this pastel down and leaving it like that, so you can see the grey paper tone through it, but that's fine. You've got to stop worrying sometimes about blending, and then because what then happens is you end up over blending, which can lead you down a very rocky road, unfortunately. Now I put this line in just because I wanted to create some diagonal difference. So obviously at the moment when you have a vase or jar of flowers, your composition is very vertical, so it's very much straight up and down. In order to create some difference, it's usually great to be able to cut the picture in a different direction. Now, that doesn't have to be necessarily on a diagonal like I've done here, but it can also be on, a horizontal, so a straight left to right. And you tend to find that when you're doing landscapes, if you just picture in your head a grassy meadow, and then you've got the horizontal line where it goes from a grassy meadow to a tree line. So then that tree line is also horizontal. It's going from one side to the other. And your sky. Now, your sky isn't although it's going horizontally from left to right, right to left, from one side to the other, it is more vertical, because when you add clouds, you do your smallest clouds at the bottom and the biggest clouds at the top, and that gives your sky depth. But that is more that gives a horizontal feel to your sky, even though your sky is based horizontally left to right. So you've got a vertical sky because of the clouds giving the depth, but your sky is actually horizontal because it's going from one side to the other. Then when you add foreground trees, you're suddenly shifting that perspective back to vertical because your trees are vertical. So you have this difference between vertical and horizontal, creating the difference and creating the contrast and creating interest in your painting. So I decided to go, I was going to do this middle section beige, and for whatever reason I just went, nah, I don't like that idea. So I got out this really, it's a pale green, but it's more of a neutral colour. Because it's neutral and it's not quite a vibrant pale green, it's giving, it's allowing the roses still to keep with the centre point. I've added a little bit of the green to where the glass jar is, because obviously, remember, glass jar is see-through, so you should be able to see the green through it. I'm just reinforcing a few bits and pieces here. I think, to be honest, I'm pretty much done with this one. I don't really want to do much more because I don't want to overwork it, especially being on a non-sanded paper. It'd just be too easy to start creating mud. You can see that I've had issues with that, where with some of the leaves where I've kind of put too much pastel down and it's not really gripping the paper, and it's more smearing the pastel around the paper rather than layering on the paper. And when it starts to get like that, it turns into mud really quickly. So I'm just adding a few lighter green highlights just to give a little bit of interest to the leaves, still trying to make them look more like leaves, but unsuccessful, I have to say. I don't mind them, it doesn't look horrendous, it just isn't quite right. So, right, let us get the tape off, I think. And then we'll be able to get a kind of better idea of how this looks. It's always, I don't know what it is, but when it's down with the tape, oh no, missed a bit, I want to put a bit more white in. Oh, come on, me. Haven't I done that already? Come on, Ginger, speed it up. Now this is me faffing, right? Which all artists do. Don't ever think there's anything wrong with it. It can, however, lead to messing up your paintings very, very quickly. However, I obviously don't listen to my own advice, and I like to nitpick and faff, which I know I shouldn't do, but I do anyway. Oh, come on, really? Do I need to do that? Yes, I probably do. I put so much white down, I kind of lost some of the shape and the darker pinks, so actually it's worth getting those darker pinks back in. It's like my one-woman mission to make a mess now. Just a bit more here and a bit more there. Here a bit, there a bit, everywhere a bit. Should see the state of my hands after this. Ah, right, now I'm done. Now I'm going to get the tape off. So out comes the heat gun. Thank God I don't have audio for that, because as some of you may well know from other videos, this thing is fairly loud. It's like a very small but powerful hairdryer. I think I measured the temperature off this one, and it gets to about 120 degrees centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. But it does mean that removing the tape is a lot easier and a lot cleaner. It doesn't rip the paper, and it's just so much easier. This tape, by the way, is just standard masking tape, which I buy from the DIY stores. So there's nothing special. It's not painter's tape, which you pay a fortune for. It is just basic masking tape, which is the cheapest of the cheap. It's also a lot more environmentally friendly because it is effectively paper tape. The only non-friendly part of it is the glue that they use on this, and I think eventually, once they make it more eco-friendly, it will be a lot better for the environment, especially considering how much tape you can go through. But it is a necessary evil because you don't want your painting sliding around while you're working on it. It does need to be stuck down. There's a couple of things I could do. I could use a metal plate and magnets, and that would work with, it would stop it moving around necessarily. It might slip a little under heavy pressure. But my only problem with that is I just don't get these nice clean lines that I can get from the painting that I can get with the tape. And I don't know, there's just something so satisfying about peeling the tape off and having these gorgeous crisp borders all the way around. I think I need more heat here. This bit was deciding it just did not want to come off for whatever reason. I think I let it cool too quickly. I keep the rooms relatively, you can see it's stuck and ripped a little bit there. But that doesn't matter too much. I can take that off. I'll just kind of pull it off. There you go. Right, and there we have it. Some roses in a jar of water. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed that. Remember, I've got another video coming out in a few days with some more fun with flowers, just a little bit more impressionistic and abstract. Otherwise, any comments, leave them below. Remember to let me know what your favourite flowers are, and hopefully you have enjoyed this one and have a go yourself. Ta-ta, and I will see you all soon.